Mr. Steve Wheatcroft in the studio today, and we're going to
Yeah.
be unpacking this story. It's going to be amazing. If you guys don't know much about Steve, you're going to find out today. But I want to go back to when you originally started. From my
Yeah.
notes, I'm saying 1989. You first
Yeah.
founded the company, and would
Yes, I
you
did. Yeah.
walk us through that? How did you start it? Why did you start it? Was it on purpose? Did you fall into it? Help us understand.
Uh, well, the true story is this, is that, I was playing on a hockey scholarship at a university. I was taking a business degree. So, and I never really was a big fan of the whole business school because especially in Calgary, it's big, like we're kind of like the Texas of Canada, like Alberta, the oil industry. So there's a lot of this grooming to kind of climb the corporate ladder. And that's kind of how the course curriculum was laid out. So I was kind of like, I had some kids when I was in university, if you believe that. So I'm living in married student housing off the back of Lot 10, in 1980, and I'm playing hockey there. 1988, it's the Winter Olympics in Calgary. So we're playing all the teams coming in from Germany and the Czech Republic and the Russians and everything. It was a pretty exciting time, but I'd go home at night and I'm changing diapers and I got to make money and I'm on a hockey scholarship and I'm working a part-time job at night in a warehouse. And then I would just go to school and sleep, and I didn't have time to study. So I wore a white t-shirt that says C's get degrees on the front. Right. So and my profs were just pissed. They're like, you could be so much smarter. And I said, look, I got kids. And they're like, what? I go, I play hockey and I'm working at night. And they're like, how can you even come to school? And I said, well, I got to get through. So I don't care. So I just sit in the lecture halls and we'll go write the tests. And then whatever I got, chapter summaries were awesome, right? Like read through those and just guess a lot of C's and you're through. But in my third year, there was a really interesting course on entrepreneurship and on building your own business. So really the course was set up to write your own business plan about a business. And it was like half a semester to do this. You had to pick a partner, and my best buddy was in it with me. So we decided to team up. And we started writing this 124-page business plan. And it was like, this wasn't a short one-pager. Like it was the full financial package, everything.
Wow.
And we decided to write it on a company we called University Lawn Services, so ULS. And the idea was to try to clean up the landscape industry. And we were going to have white trucks and we were going to be the white knights of the industry. And then it was kind of a franchise model to because at the time, college pro painting was a big thing in Canada. I'm pretty sure you guys had that in the US. It might have started there. So we kind of want to be the next one of those. So we write this business plan and we get a B-, right? So I'm like, to the prof, I'm like, we have the only idea out of this whole class that's going to make money. He goes, well, it's not very creative. And then I was lecturing the prof on how, being in business, there's a lot of creativity, but the objective is actually to make money. So I'm like, so anyway, I had spent the previous 3 summers like jumping out of helicopters, and we were doing like tree planting, and I worked seismic, like in the oil patch, like laying down seismic lines for exploration and out in the bush, and I'd be away, and now I was in love and I had a girlfriend, all this kind of shit. So I decided to stay in town. And we said, well, let's just try this, let's try this business plan. Let's start a landscape company. So we started it up in 89. We had pretty good success that summer. We made way more money than we would have leaving town. And it was pretty lucrative going and doing these kind of isolated jobs. We got paid a lot to do them. And then that year, so 1990, I graduated with a business degree. I had BCom in marketing, finished out my scholarship, and had a lot of job offers, but they were all to go work for these big corporate companies downtown. And it was funny. It was like, well, what are you guys hiring me for? Don't worry about it. We just want you to play left wing on the hockey team, on the counting hockey team. We'll figure that out later. And I just couldn't put a suit on. That just wasn't me. I love being outdoors, hence the tree planting and the seismic work. So we launched University Lawn Services full time. And there was me and my buddy, and then he went to a corporate job 3 months into it. So he left me. And then my other 2 partners were my brother and Ross. And those 2 guys played on the hockey team with me, and they were younger than me. My brother was playing in the Western Hockey League and ended up playing pro in Germany. And those guys loved that I was running the business full time. They still had 2 more years of school, and they were making all this money. So we kind of worked it out, and that's how it kind of started off. And then over the years, I bought my brother out in 93, and then I bought Ross out, my brother's best friend, in 2012. I can't say he's my brother that business gave me. Like, he's a great guy. And it was tough we went through some stuff on the partnership when it broke up, but we're best buddies still now, and it all worked out. But that's kind of how it started. It was kind of spurred from that. And then, we had this university lawn service, so we changed it to ULS Maintenance and Landscaping, and then eventually it just became ULS. And after private equity bought us, it kind of morphed into another name, which we can talk about later. But yeah, it was good.
Wow. So I did not know that, actually. That's how you started. It was a college assignment, basically, to build a business plan. And then you took that business plan and built a business off a B- business plan. You created an A+ business, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I wish I could find this prof now, right? Because they always say, if you can't do, you teach, right? And the doers do, right? So, and I think I said that to him. So I'd love to say, well, hey, basically built or founded the biggest landscape company in Canada. That would be a nice thing to tell him now, but whatever, we'll let that slide.
We'll let it slide. I think for people listening, it's just never let anyone tell you what your limit is or what you're capable of.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, like when I started it, especially the fact that I had kids, it was hard to turn down that solid paycheck. And
I bet. And
for the first probably 10 years, it was always like, well, I'll do this till I find something better. And I admit that now, and I can think back to how it held me back, because I never was fully vested until right around somewhere between year 8 and 10, where I went, you know what? I got to stop thinking this way and thinking something else is going to come along. And as soon as I fully committed, which would have been probably right around, 1998, 1999, like the business just took off from there. It just went into hyper growth mode.
Looking back on that, was there an aha moment? It sounds like there was, but what was the catalyst to that? Did you just realize that, or did someone help you see that? How did you realize I need to go all in on this thing? And then you were able to turn the jetpack up.
Well, I think part of it is that unwittingly I had dug myself so far into debt and loans and equipment loans, and I was like, I'm screwed. Like, how am I even going to get out?
Yeah.
And then I realized that, it's kind of like, I don't know if you do a lot of fishing. I'm actually going fly fishing tomorrow.
Oh,
but nice. When you get a real bad fish hook in your finger, a lot of people try to pull it out and it doesn't work. You got to push it through. Right. And so I was kind of in that spot where the realization was like, I gotta go. I can't get out. I have to, this has to work. And then I really started to change the way I thought the thoughts was always, well, this is something till I find something better. Now it's like, well, I'm going to have the biggest landscape company in Calgary, because that's where we originally started, and we end up with multiple branches, but I'm going to be the biggest in Calgary. And then after that was to be the biggest in Alberta. That was to be the biggest in Canada. I just kept, and that's simple kind of visioning, right? Like it's easy to say, oh, I'm going to be the biggest landscape company in the US or whatever, wherever you are. But that just came out of my mouth. And then it was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then I was all in. And once you go all in on something, typically you get better results, right?
I'm a big proponent of all in. It's why in 2025, we decided to go into electric equipment. Our team said, look, we're either going to do this all the way or we're not going to do this at all. We went 100% all in. And it's been one of the best things that we've done. Yeah. Not just because the electric equipment helped us sell and helped us be more efficient and what have you, but it was the fact that we went all in on something that we could all get behind as a company. And it's a big difference.
And I think when you're like a all in type person, people want to be around that. So there's all these people around me. It's like, well, maybe Steve's not going to do this anymore. He's going to shut it down. So this may be not a career. And then I said, I'm all in. I'm doing this until, the day they remove me from this planet. Now people are like, I'm a safe bet, right? I'm with this guy because he's going to make it work. I was a captain of my hockey team. I was captain of my rugby team. I was like, well, people were like, I've seen Steve all in. I like that guy. I'm going. I'm with him, right?
Yeah, I'm going to put my money behind that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good bet.
So speaking about people, it's been a cornerstone as long as I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's a passion of yours, I can tell, in business of how do you bring people together and have people-centric businesses. Was that how you always ran your business, or was there a time or an experience that changed your perspective that you focus more on people?
I was a people guy from day one. And I think some of the reasons why I was strong in that area is because I was deficient in other areas. So like my wife now often says, like, you're a cheater because you manipulate everybody to do all the work, right? So it's like, I'm like, are you trying to compliment me or are you cutting me down? And I know she is trying to cut me down, but I was always good at finding the fun in work and finding like the challenge and I don't want to say completely gamifying it, but making it into this kind of like us against them or a challenge or, you know, this bonding of a team against whether it was, you know, you can look at business as an adversary in a way, like, you know, most businesses fail. So we're not going to be in the stats that said we failed. We're going to succeed. And we're going to succeed in an industry at the time that was really not very advanced. Like when I started ULS, there was no emails, there was no cell phones, you know, there wasn't the equipment there was today. It was kind of like, you know, why would you ever want to be a landscaper?
Yeah.
And to some regards, that's still the mentality. But I was like, hey, like we should be proud of what we're doing. Let's go out there and show the world that, you know, we're great people. And we had lots of people that were in the trades. We had lots of college educated people. I mostly recruited at the beginning I used sport as a way to recruit because I was involved in sports. So we became a place like the women's Olympic team so I think that would have been in 90. I was like 92 or something. If they came and cut lawns for me, they didn't have to do cardio, and the Canadian Olympic program was based. So the coach of the team, I knew him because he coached me. So I had all these women hockey players. I had guys from the American Hockey League, some guys that ended up going and playing the NHL that played for us. And I used that team framework from sports and I brought it over to landscaping and kind of created that real strong team environment and made it fun to come to work. I don't know why people want to set up businesses that aren't fun because, you know, you sleep for 8 hours. If you're lucky, you get 8 hours to get your personal stuff done and you're working for 8 hours. And then when do you have fun? Like if you're not having fun at work, like the chances of having it in that 8 hours, like by the time you look after kids and fix your car and cut the grass or whatever else you have to do, you better be smiling your ass off at work because it's a great place to have some fun and joke around and have friendships. And I did that from day one and it just paid dividends.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I love having fun. It's one of our fundamentals, keep things fun. And actually just right before this podcast, we had a pizza party with our team and we do it every month and we get together for an hour and we play cornhole and we bet on stuff and, you know, it's just hanging out. And we did a soccer game last weekend. It's really important to keep things fun. So I want to hear a little bit more of the sports and business integration because I really freaking love that. Where did you, like, what aspects did you, I'm trying to think of the questions. Maybe it's this, how did you actually make things fun at work? What were some of those things you did and brought in from the sports industry?
Well, I think it's kind of like, you know, we were really big on, you know, making sure, like almost that model, like don't leave anybody in the field, like the U.S. military. Don't leave any man behind. Let's all go together and let's try to do some great things. And, you know, whether it's a positive or negative, I did have probably a high amount of hockey players that worked at ULS. And some guys went on to play in the NHL that worked for me. And I still see them and they're like, Steve, even though I'm making all this money, it's one of the funnest places I ever worked. Because I grew up in that environment where you're in the locker room and you're trout mouthing and we did that at work and it was hilarious. And when we didn't have like cell phones or anything. So we were on two-way radios back then, which was kind of scary because when you hold the button down, every two-way radio, and we had like 60 trucks in the field already. Well, every 60 trucks hear it. Wow. Yeah. You know, we used to have this policy like windows down, right? And the great part about it is we had a lot of women that worked for us, and they were just as bad, and we had just like fun with them, and yeah, and it's just, and I think it was a group of people that kind of, I say this in a positive way, that kind of got off on working hard. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you stayed out doing snow removal for 10 hours. Well, I stayed out for 15 hours. Well, next time I'm staying out for 18 hours. And we kind of like made it, and we gamified things. We always had like, we had the ULS record wall, like who's cut the most grass in a week and who's done this the most. And so there's always this kind of friendly competition.
Yeah.
And just that, like you said, just sometimes, and getting to know people outside of work. Like when we had an event, it was like all kids, all wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, bring your mom, bring your grandma. We knew that was a great way to build a company where people wanted to stick around. So
I really like that you said that. It's our Christmas party every year. We invite everybody, the whole family, and we have 150, 160 employees. We have 500-600 people that show up to our Christmas party. So it's like, bring the family, let's hang out, let's get everything going. I think a lot of people feel like work has to be work and has to be very like the strict professional, kind of like you said, like the suit and tie. And I never really fit that mold. I think a lot of people are trying to find their home and trying to find a way. So what was one of the things that you did in business that really correlated to actually increasing your growth? Was this team dynamic and this gamification? You grew this company pretty amazingly and organically. How did the gamification tie into you growing the business?
Well, I think like it was, maybe it wasn't through the gamification, but I think the fun was allowing people to not have a ceiling on what they wanted to do. So it'd be like, I'd always like, and I talked about it on another podcast, and we called it kind of elephant hunting, where we come up with these like, it was like, who can come up with the most outrageous like contract that we could get, right? And people would be like, yeah, we're gonna do like every transit station in Calgary one day, and we're gonna cut all the public parks, we're gonna take over all the golf courses, and we put all these ideas on a board, and then we would start to try to get them, and that was like broadcast out to the whole company, like, let's see what we can do. Like, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes we took on some contracts and we did stuff that wasn't that profitable. But I was good at pivoting real quick and saying, okay, we got to get out of this, and reversing decisions. But I'll tell you, when you let people dream and do whatever and go for it, they love that shit. Like, who wants to go to a place where you're crammed in a box and you're handcuffed? I mean, that's no fun. But what about a place where you can dream and you can kind of come up with cool ideas, and we're going to try to do them and build really neat equipment? And I mean, some of the stuff we did was, we decided we were going to build these custom trucks one year, and we built like 10 of them. And I still see them around Calgary all the time now. And these things they were like a caterpillar with this huge back on it, did all kinds of stuff. And I mean, they're still around. And, we had a team of 10, and we'd meet like once a week. And cause we let a week go by, and we kind of kept designing them. And what would this ultimate truck be like? And it cost me a lot of money to do it, but in the end, it worked out. And in the end, we realized that it maybe wasn't, but it was just the fun of doing that kind of stuff, and really kind of trying to be innovative and come up with new concepts. And it kept things fresh and lively and exciting to come to work. People like that.
Yeah, it's a place where people are allowed to dream, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So let's talk a little bit about your exit to private equity and kind of what brought you to that point. Let's just start there. You came to a point, you decided to sell the company. What was that process like?
Yeah, and I'm pretty candid about the private equity experience, but I think some of it, when I decided to sell, it was kind of maybe it wasn't for the right reason. I think I felt pretty fatigued at the time. Okay. We had come through a hard stretch where we got put into what's called, in Canada, they call it SAM, Special Accounts Management, where you start to default on certain covenants and ratios. So the bank, and people don't really realize it, like I went years and years where, because I was such a risk taker and gunslinger, that I was out of covenant all the time. And I'd go to the bank and, well, I'm going out of covenant for 2 years. like on a debt to equity ratio or something, they'd be like, hey, no problem.
Yeah.
And it isn't a problem until a new boss comes into town or the bank changes their policy. So when we got put into special accounts management, it was more out of policy change. So, the bank might say, we're not going to back, service-based construction companies. And landscaping is in that. And they put a line on a spreadsheet and you're below it. And their job's to get rid of you. Now they're looking for excuses to get rid of you. So, hey, you're out of covenant. We're going to put you in special accounts management, which usually means you better start looking for another bank. Because they say they're there to help you, but they're not.
Yeah.
If you think help is you're drowning and they throw you an anchor, I guess they're helping you. But they want to finish you off. So I'd kind of come through a real big stretch like that. We'd righted the ship. We were doing good again, everything. And I was like, I don't know, I got up one morning and it was just like no different than saying I'm the biggest landscape company in Canada. I said, I'm going to be out of this in 2 to 3 years. And as soon as I said that and started to be interested in that, it started to percolate. Now, you got to remember, I'm in Canada. It's like 2017, 2018. It wasn't the buzz that it is right now in private equity, especially in Canada, especially in Western Canada. It was dead. Like, there's no deals getting done. And really, it was really serendipitous. As soon as I started thinking about it, I got a call. And for me, I had 2 other businesses at the time. So I was building like industrial condo bays for blue collar companies. So like if you had an electrical company and you had 10 vans, I was building these buildings for them.
Okay.
And then I had Spectrum Equipment, which was representing a number of original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, and then renting and selling heavy equipment to the energy industry. So I had a place to go. I was worried about the staff too, because I thought, well, what happens if I get fatigued? And, the only way to get out is to liquidate and move assets. So I decided to sell, and that would have been in October of 2019. And then once I sold, they retained me to be part of the M&A team. And then 3 months, and I left to go work at Spectrum. And 3 months later, they phoned me up and said, Steve, we want you to come back and help us grow it across Canada and be the CEO. And I'm like, no. I'm not coming back. And then they have a way of leveraging you to come back. And so some of it was remuneration. Some of it was, well, if you don't come back, this was what might happen. And I didn't like that. This is what might happen. And it was more around like, employees that I had working for me. I wanted them to be able to continue and be successful. And they thought I was the best leader for them. So I came back. And then that would have been in early 2020. And then all of a sudden we rapidly started to acquire companies, which was a very good experience for me because I got to watch how that all works. And I got to be a part of the private equity playbook and see how that all transpired out. It was a very good experience, but it was different. And I kind of, the difference would be this, like as a CEO of a publicly or of a private equity firm, it's completely different than being an entrepreneur. So it's kind of like, and I don't know if you're kind of a California guy, so you remember when, everyone was wearing van runners and skinny jeans came out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm a big hockey player, legs, you see me. So but I had to try skinny jeans. So I pulled these skinny jeans on, and I'll tell you, they were super tight on my legs. My balls were pushed up to my throat, trying to wear skinny. That's what it was like taking an entrepreneur and trying to make him be the CEO of a private equity owned company. Pants didn't fit me and they were uncomfortable and I didn't like it. And it wasn't very long after I started to sit in that seat that I realized this isn't for me. It's a whole different feeling. It takes a whole different mentality. And it just wasn't for me. So we parted ways. And I moved on from the company. And it was a good time for me to leave. I always say, that's one thing. It's kind of one of I think I've added another level of leadership. But one of the very end stages of leadership is knowing when to leave something, because I know a lot of leaders stay too long. Like they kind of overstay their welcome. They get this mentality that they get to a point where they need the company more than the company needs them, and the company gives them a bit of an ego boost, but they're timed out. And they need to say, this isn't about me anymore, it's about other people. And that's how I felt. Like, it was time for Steve to move on. And so I just skated off the ice, hung the jersey up, and I'm done. And it really was that easy for me. And once I moved on, I found that to be, it felt weird because you spent so many years building this company up. And I just looked out of the window and I just saw one of our trucks drive by.
That's weird.
When I left, we had 390 trucks or something in Canada. So I see them all the time. And it's part of my legacy, but I don't want to be the guy that just talks about, oh, that's what I did. I wanted to kind of have a new legacy, and I wanted to move on, but it still felt weird.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. What was the biggest difference as a entrepreneur founder versus private equity backed CEO? You described it great with that analogy, but yeah. I just want to ask from a day-to-day standpoint, what's the biggest difference that maybe was the biggest point of frustration for you?
Well, here I am, spent over 30 years doing this, and I tried so many different things. And really, I think if somebody was going to engage in me and wanted to learn from me, or said, Steve, I want to ask you questions, or mentor, the best thing I have to offer them is how many times he screwed up.
Yep.
And how many mistakes I made. Because somebody will say, I'm going to do this, and I'll go, well, here's what happened when I did that. And let's decide what was Steve's fault and what was just, part of the matrix of making that decision. And a lot of times I finally figured out the right way, but there was so much lost time. So here I am now at, my early 50s, mid 50s, and I'm working for these guys. They have no clue on what the landscape industry is about. And I'm telling them, here's what we have to do. And they're like, no, we don't believe that. We think we should do it this way. And I go, well, I know it's not going to work. And then they're like, why? And I go, well, because I tried that in 2012 and it didn't work. And then they say, okay, now you have to prove it to us. And now I have to take a team of 2 or 3 private consultants from Ernst & Young or KPMG and spend $250,000 to get a report done on it. And then I get the report back and it's exactly what I told them 4 months ago. And I've been having to sit around, and it's so frustrating. And, I think that I've seen guys in my situation that were entrepreneurs, CEOs that built landscape companies, now are participating and working on the private equity side of it and helping to run a private equity held company. And they do okay. And they just have the character. They were able to evolve. Now, is it a knock against me because I couldn't evolve? Maybe. Or maybe is it, I just don't like beet soup. You know what I mean? Some people come and try this. It's, you could do this, but I just didn't like it. And I'm pretty honest, as you know, you've met me a few times. I'm not going to sit there and bullshit somebody very long before I go, no, I don't believe in this. I'm not doing it, and I'm done. And that's basically what happened.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the company's fine now. It continues to operate. We're still, probably the biggest landscape company in Canada. I mean, Weedman's bigger than us, but they have a lot of sales in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they have kind of got a mixed bag of acquisitions they've made. But, in the end, it's all worked out. They're still doing good. The company's still around. There's been mistakes made on both sides, but it's not easy, and you're going to make mistakes when you're trying to build something that big. So it's all worked out for everybody.
And that's good. And I think hearing you say this makes a lot of sense, because I have seen a lot of friends who have sold to private equity and go into that world. And there's this frustration of someone who has maybe more education and technically more M&A experience, but there's a founder who's now the CEO trying to tell them that the thing that you want me to do is not going to work. And then you have a really shitty situation, like you're saying, because now you have to prove them wrong, which is the last thing you want to do, because as CEOs, we want to grow the company, not go and spend 3-4 months proving the point that you already know. So I can see how frustrating that would be. I have a question for you on this because it kind of ties into, I think, a lot of people who are just CEOs, not private equity backed. When you hire a leader and you put them in place, and that leader has some level of experience, but maybe hasn't failed or made as many mistakes as you, and they start coming up with these, oh, what if we started offering this service, or what if we started building our trucks like this? And you're like, fuck, man, we already did that and it didn't work. How, as a CEO, do you lead that person without crushing their inspiration and their creativity, and not being the guy that has to call the shots?
Well, I think a good way to look at that is to don't say you're wrong. Like, don't say to that person, you're wrong and I'm right. What you need to say is, okay, I heard what you told me, but I want to tell you a story. And I want to tell you a story about what happened back 3 years ago. And you tell them the story, and then you say to them, how is your idea going to rewrite this story in a positive way? And then shut up and sit back and see what they say. Because maybe you just executed improperly, or maybe you made a mistake there, right? And the nice thing about where I was is I was 54, so it wasn't like I tried it once and there's the story. It was like, well, I'll tell you 3 stories. This is how we all were. So I had exhausted a lot of the different ways you could do something. But it's always good to hear a new perspective, and especially, younger people are looking at the world differently. And with all the stuff that's going on with tech and AI, like, there's a lot of things shifting. Even with equipment now, a lot of things shifting. So you can't be that old curmudgeon that says, that won't work because, everything's got to be gas, so everything's got to be a V8 engine, or what, you can't be that old guy. So yeah, I think what you want to do is you want to give them the opportunity to have a rebuttal and hear them out. And maybe there's some value in there. At the end of the day, though, it's your job. You bring on leaders, but you're the leader of the leaders. So you still have to step in and make sure that they're not wasting time or resources. But I think if you let them readjust, sometimes they might come up with a hybrid that might work, or it might kind of find a good path. And like I said, maybe you made the mistake way back when you did it the first time. But, I found that some of the stuff that was going on when I was trying to CEO this large company, I knew it was not going to work.
Right? I know what you mean. There's certain things that just is like, it's a non-negotiable. We're not doing that. But when you don't own the majority of the company and you're not, you don't have the board seats, now it becomes board seats, right? And how are we going to pull this, and how are we going to pull this vote? And it becomes very political at that point. And that doesn't help anyone either.
No, it doesn't. And like I said, it's a whole different feeling, and one that I didn't like. So maybe I wasn't the best guy to sit there and navigate that, just because of my personality and stuff, right? And it was tough because I was this leader that led a certain way, and now there's restrictions on it. So everybody that I led before is like looking at me going, well, why is this happening? And I'm like, I couldn't pull the wool over their eyes and sell it to them. No. It's hard to sell something you don't believe in.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's like, who are you loyal to at the end of the day? You have a contractual obligation, fiduciary obligation as a CEO, but then you have your Steve as a human obligation to the people who have helped you get to where you are. I can see why that part of your life becomes like, all right, I gotta move on and make that call.
Yeah, because for me, it's always the people. It's always like what's best for the people. And I wasn't going to try to trick anybody to try to make somebody else money when I knew it wasn't right. I always think you can make good decisions that can make you money. And it also is the best decision for everybody at the company. It's not this or that. It's this and that. Like, how do we make money and have a positive culture and a positive work environment? Because it's not sustainable if you're just making money and the people aren't behind it. It'll eventually fall apart.
So I completely agree. I want to talk about making money for a minute, because you definitely have an ability to make money. What are some of the ways people can improve profitability in maybe let me set this question up a bit. So I think right now we go through the industry, you and I talk to a lot of people, and one of the big challenges right now is a lot of innovative companies doing some really cool things, building great teams, great culture, implementing Leanscaper, maybe looking to implement Leanscaper and other tools. And then at the end of the day, they're like, man, I'm just not making any money. And I'm having a really hard time figuring this out. What are some of the ways that you've gotten through those points in your career and made your company highly profitable, or at least marginally profitable, like north of 10%?
Yeah, and I think that most companies don't make money in this industry.
Yeah, it seems that way.
No, that is how it is.
Yeah.
Most of them are barely getting by, and a lot of people, like, I always say top line vanity, bottom line sanity, cash flow is king, because they're so focused on revenue growth, and they don't understand that, really it's about gross margin and it's about being profitable. So I always say now is like, if you're going to grow responsibly. And at the start of any company, you have to have revenue. And usually what happens is a revenue, especially like companies that are 0 to, let's say, 15 people, it's kind of like, there's a book out there called Navigating the Growth Curve, and it talks about the relationship about how you grow businesses related to the number of people you have. And when you're at 0 to 10 people, it's only about revenue. You have to have enough to have the lights on. And so you really have created a job for yourself. And then after that, as you start to grow, you start to have to realize that there's only one reason to do this, it's for profit. And you have to start to really be responsible, because every time you grow a company, it requires the company to become more complex. And the solution everybody has for complexity is hiring more people. And then because you have more people and you have more complexity and more systems, it causes more cash to be needed. And so it sucks all the cash out of businesses. So it's really dangerous. So I kind of look at growth as like a sprint. And then you have to be like, when you work out, you have to recover. But what you'll see is these people that constantly grow, and then they're going to hit a spot where the complexity, number of people, and the need for cash causes a switch to be flipped that puts the company in distress. And I flipped that switch 3 times. 3 times where I went, oh no, this is bad. Like special accounts management once I had a loan pulled. Another time we just about went bankrupt. We are self-financed, but we were choking out online. And it was all because I didn't understand that, we can sprint for 110 yards, but then we have to stop. We have to eat a sandwich, have a glass of water. I kind of say like your head goes through the door and then your ass is still in the other room. You got to get in the room and let your ass come with you. People are going into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th room and their ass is still in room 1. And they get stretched out like a wiener dog, and they're like confused and, where's my ass? Well, it's not even with you anymore. And I see it happen all the time. So, I think that what people realize is they have to get to that point where they have enough revenue to have this company, and then growth after that has to be really strategic. And just going after contracts based on price is just a death sentence. Yeah. So if you look at most companies, I was talking to some other guys that have sold their company, and we were talking about theories, and one of the guys brought up the terrible 25. So if you're a maintenance company, for instance, you take your top 25 companies, you're probably making good money. The middle 50%, you're kind of just getting there. You're maybe making 2 or 3%. And then you've got this bottom 25, the terrible 25, that basically cancel out the top 25. And you're left with the middle bandwidth of 50. And that's why you see most maintenance landscape companies doing 1, 2 to maybe 5% profit, because all the supercharged profit they're making gets removed by this bottom 25. So I always say that's the first thing you should look at is like, what's going on with the bottom 25% of your contracts? Like, where's that line? And before you go and add more revenue on, I would just replace that bottom 25% revenue. And when you do that, a strange thing's going to happen is part of those middle 50 are now going to become your bottom 25. And so now you can kind of, and then once you've done that cleansing once or twice, then you'll see it'll settle out, and then you'll figure it out. You'll get your pricing right and everything. But I see just all the companies that I work with that are doing well are because they understand what they have to charge and they hold the line. And if they can't get work, they don't drop prices. They say, how can I add more value? How do I make it that somebody can't turn me down? How can I, like, that's a strategic move to say, how can we sell a job at 25 grand that everybody else is selling at 19,000?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do it? Well, there's tons of strategies around that, right?
Give me a couple.
Well, I bought my wife a Range Rover when I sold my company, and I'm like, this is the worst investment I've ever made. And I asked my wife why she wanted a Range Rover, and she goes, well, I like them. They're cool, and da-da-da-da. Well, I'm like, well, I could just go and get you like an Acura MDX. Like, they're half the price. They're a damn good vehicle. Nah, it's not cool. There's an example right there.
There it is. Sell the Range Rover.
Yeah, you've got to build your company that way. And every time somebody in your company talks with somebody, and when I mean talks to somebody, I'm not talking about in business. I'm talking about when they're out playing pickleball, or they go out to the pub, or they're playing hockey, or they're at church, or whatever you're involved in. How does that person that works for you talk about the company? Like, do they say, we got the best people, you should see our equipment, man, we do good work? Or do they just say, I work at this shitty landscape company? Because you're building up the brand every day. And your brand is what drives the profit. And people don't realize, like, I see so many guys, like, the website isn't there, the trucks are beat up. They don't, like, yeah, you can't ask for very much more money. But you've got to create that strong brand, and you've got to stick it out, and you've got to sell value, and you got to have an operations team that delivers. I was always a big operations guy. Like, operations trumps sales. And I was on another podcast where some guys, it was tongue in cheek, but they said, Steve, we're kind of offended. Like, we're sales guys. Cause I said to the podcaster, I said, if I was at my house and, some guys grabbed me and they said, hey, you got to go and shoot your head of sales or head of ops, or we're going to kill your kids, who would you shoot? I said, I'd just walk in, I'd put 2 bullets right between the sales guy's eye, like that. I wouldn't even hesitate. I said this on a landscape podcast. Well, now go to the Leanscaper singing all these sales guys like, Steve, like, why would you shoot us? And I said, because if we don't have strong ops and great service delivery, we have nothing to sell. Because what you do is you make everyone on the sales team a liar.
Sell the dream, deliver the nightmare.
Yeah. Like, I can't work and go out and sell unless I knew my guys could deliver. And so I think that's what a lot of people focus on. They like, well, we got to make more money. We got to sell more stuff. We got to like get more revenue in, but they're doing it backwards. It's like, build strong teams, have good value, offer exceptional service. Sales guys understand we don't give it away for free. We don't park a K&D truck outside of anybody's house unless they're paying us for it. You don't necessarily have to be the Range Rover of landscaping, but you better be at least a BMW X5, If
you want to charge a decent wage or a decent price, I think one thing I'm picking up here, and I want to mention, is companies are basically trying to optimize the sales process, and they're talking about, how do we pitch better? How do we create better proposals? How do we trick the clients into buying from us? And that's where they're going to hear us talking about this. That's where they're going to go focus their attention. And I think this is a private equity trap that a lot of private equity people fall into, which is optimizing sales performance without optimizing the value and delivery of operational performance. And so I just want to highlight that of what you just said is, it's not optimizing your sales to become, to wrap things in a Range Rover bow, but it's actually building the operational capacity that is providing more value to your client. Right. Because otherwise it's just a nasty cycle of sales and then losing a client, and then you got to go sell more, and you're in this treadmill that never ends.
And it's such a subtle thing. Like, here's a true story. So here I am. I got all these like NCAA college hockey players and people, girls from the Olympic hockey program working for me. And I come, like, we're in this pretty rich part of Calgary, and we've got tons of maintenance and construction going on in this one community. So I'm just driving through, and I see some of my crew, and they're taking shots on this kid. Like, this 8-year-old kid's got his goalie equipment on and a net because it's Canada, right? And they're ripping tennis balls at this kid. And they're playing down in, like, Wisconsin for the Badgers, right? And I see him, and my guys are like, oh, shit, like, it's Steve. He's the owner, and we're, like, screwing around playing ball hockey with the kids in the neighborhood, right? And I just drive by, and I don't say anything. So that night, the crews come back, and they're all like, oh, Steve, we're sorry. You know, I know it's company time. I said, dudes, you can do that shit all day. You know, try to keep it at 10 or 15 minutes. And they said, why? I said, because their dad phoned up and told me how awesome you guys are. You know, like,
Yeah.
And the dad's like, we want you guys around our kids, and we'll pay you guys more money. Like, my kids love you guys.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And nobody gets it. Like, they're so worried about sell more, but it's like, what's the image in the community? Like, I always tell companies, like, if you want to be a better company and you want to get more, become involved in the community. We had a big thing here where, you know, Trout Unlimited Canada was shocking this river, and we had to pull all these fish out. They couldn't get people. I said, we're going to come on the weekend with all our trucks. We invited the wives and the kids and the husbands, and we all went down, and we had so much fun saving all these fish. Well, that night we're on the national news, we're on the local news.
Yep.
And now people are like, we give them a quote for 24 grand, and they go, you guys are 24 grand. This other company was 18, but we're going with you guys because you're part of the community.
Yeah.
So you sell the brand, you sell the value, you sell, like, I'd rather give my money to this company because they're great people and they're investing back into the community, you know, as opposed to giving these guys because they're a bit cheaper. And I've seen their work. It's not that good. So it's like, I see a lot of companies, they get all these sales and then they don't deliver, and then you don't get too many chances either.
It's a small industry in a lot of small towns out there, small world.
Yeah.
People talk, and it's when you do that, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you deliver low value, you then now have to reduce your pricing to continue to sell, because, you know, at 24,000, they're buying ours, but if someone's going to charge 12,000, they may actually give them a shot. And so now you have those companies underbidding themselves from the last year they bid a property or they bid a job, and they just get lower and lower. And then, of course, their services get worse and worse quality. So
yeah, we used to track our close rate, and our closing rate on quotes was about 25%. And, you know, I've seen lots of companies that say, oh, ours is 80, ours is 90. And I'm like, I told our guys, if it goes higher than 26, I'm going to be pissed. And I said, they're like, I go, that's like the speed gun on a pitcher. Like, you got to be throwing at one, you got to throw smoke. I want to see 101 on this gun. And the 101 means there's going to be some wild pitches. You're going to hit some batters, but I need smoke. I don't need like 89 mile an hour pitches, and I don't want to be 80% close rate. Nope. So these are the things that I preach and the things that I wanted our guys to live by. And they're like, this is fun.
Yeah.
Right. They're excited. Like, we're not always going to be low ballers. And then the ops guys go, you guys get them at this price. We're going to deliver, you know, spending an extra 15 minutes talking to the kids when they're coming back from school, or making sure, you know, the people on the property felt good about things, asking them stuff. You know, are you happy? These little things that a lot of companies are too rushed. They can't. They say they want to provide exceptional service, but it's not in the price. Can't do it.
Can't do it. Yeah, if you don't price it in, you can't do it. You know, it's interesting. My dad bids a fair amount of work. So it's funny. He takes all the work that no one else wants to bid that comes into the office. And so he's kind of like the backstop of taking all the work that is either too complicated, maybe it's a picky client, maybe it's not really our ICP, but it's still a really good relationship, or it was referred from
Yeah.
someone that, knows them. And so he goes and bids these jobs at a very high price with a ton of hours. And so my dad's name's Kendall. And there's a saying around the ops yard, which is, hey, I got a Kendall project. And
Yeah.
if you got a
Yeah.
Kendall project, you got plenty of freaking hours. You're going to have him on site helping you. He's going to give you all the details that most of the other sales reps aren't going to give you. And so we actually created this AI, which was Ask Kendall,
Oh,
because
cool.
it's just based on how he bids work. And so that's how we're trying to kind of embrace this idea of sales is look at Kendall. He's got a high, his close rates in that range of 25-30%. And he's taking all the leads that everyone else says, I don't want to waste my time with.
Yeah.
So it's doable, and people are doing it.
And one thing I always told my sales guy is anybody that did sales, I did this too. It was my favorite line. So I'll give it to you guys today. So you do the sales and they're like, well, you guys are pretty high. And I kind of would look at them and go, yeah, we've got a great company, great people, and we invest in really good equipment and do great work. And I understand if you don't go with us because we are quite a bit higher. That's okay. Can you do me one favor though? And they would go, okay, because I'm nice. They're like, sure, Steve, because they're feeling guilty because they want to go with us. And I go, can you keep our quote around in case they don't perform or they make a mistake or they screw up? Because then I want you to be able to call me, and I'm not going to be offended that you don't take me today, but I want to make sure I get a chance to fix it. Oh,
yep.
That was a killer. And, we were doing 55 something million in snow. That was the best thing you could ever do for snow removal, because almost every company screws up in snow. And they would phone us, and as soon as there was a big snow event, we would get literally, this one time, we must have picked up 50, 60 contracts in a week just from the guy. Steve, I'm calling you up. You're right. Those guys suck. And the phone slammed. And then they're hiring us, right? So you don't always have to win. Sometimes it's good to come in the second place and be ready to perform when the other guy screws up, because it's probably going to happen.
How did you hold your standards so high as you guys scaled to such large volume? I think that seems to be a challenge for most folks.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I started to move away from more and more complex tasks and move to more repeatable, easier to deliver tasks, right? So, and It's weird. I mean, it was strategic in a way, usually because I started to sense like, I don't know if we can be the best at this. We still at 100 million. So it's like, we got out of really high-end residential because I didn't want to be in that market anymore. Like, I think you can be highly successful at that, but you can't have a huge, we had lots of maintenance too and a lot of different things. And it was like, this is like almost a whole different business with a whole different set of rules and the ways you have to run it, processes. And I couldn't invest enough time in that because it was so deep, right? Whereas when you're scaling like very repeatable tasks, it's more about like, how do you do it across 100 crews as opposed to doing it super deep over 10 crews? And so I just gravitated toward more and more of that work and less of this. So, when we started working for big general contractors and they wouldn't pay us for 90 days and they started stretching us, using it as their syndicate bank, I just went around town and said, I don't work for you guys anymore. My trucks will not be parked on your site. And they were pissed.
Yep.
And I said, they said, Steve, I said, I will work for you, but you got to pay me down deposits, progress billing, 30 days. Well, that's not how general contractors work. I said, like I said, I don't work for you guys anymore. I just removed myself from that market and moved to something that I felt like I could, like for instance, we put up every transit terminal station in Calgary. So I think a lot of like landscape maintenance and construction companies think, they think about landscaping. I thought about what can we do with 150 trucks when we were just in Calgary? What can we do with 150 trucks that has a whole bunch of people that are good at carrying out, pre-planned operations plans on a big scale? So we started to do like, single receptacle garbage changeouts. We built custom trucks for that. We started putting transit terminal stations in. We started cutting 50 million square meters of grass a week for city parks, contract cutting for big golf courses, because it was repeatable, easy to train. So that's kind of how I did it. I'm not saying it's the right way, but if you're going to go into these more complex things, I think you got to really focus in on it. Like if you want to do high-end design build residential, then that's really all you could probably do, because that in itself is just a monster to keep everything and, you know, in all in order and all under order and all delivered properly. Because at the end of the day, the homeowner comes home and they're looking at it through a microscope.
Every day.
Yeah, you're cutting a public park that's 100 acres, and you leave a mohawk in the middle of it. No one's calling you up, and next week you'll get it when you cut it next week. They don't know, you know. But if all the stuff around the parking lots is nice and there's no litter, they're happy. So that's one of the things that I started to do. I started to gravitate and stop thinking so much like a landscape company. I thought, what do we need trucks, people for, that's easy to do a good job at and is repeatable and scalable. So that's where I kind of found my ICP, you know?
Yeah. Well, what it's reminding me of is that we live in an infinite world and an abundant world. And there is opportunity and work and people that need services all around us. But we often put these glasses or lenses on that we only see certain things in front of us. And then we get really worried about losing jobs. That's why people don't let go of their bottom 25%. And we get really worried about not having enough work. And so we start to try to like hold on to anything we can get our hands on. You've taken and continue to take a completely different mindset, which I really appreciate you sharing so openly, which is it's an abundance mindset. Like what is out there that we could do and we could scale, because it's clear that scale is part of the vision and was part of the vision. I want to pivot real quick, Steve. We haven't really talked about what you're doing today. And, what do you do? What do you do day to day? I see the Leanscaper poster in the background. You know, what's the world of Steve looking like in 2026 here?
Well, I took about a year off, you know, did some fly fishing. I have a big property that I worked on to get it all up into shape. And then, you know, Mark Bradley contacted me, wanted me to come on and work with the advisory group at Leanscaper. And I already had a couple of clients that I was doing advisory work for. So, you know, for me, and I talked to my wife about it, I said, look, you know, if I stick around the house here, I'm going to drive you nuts. So, you know, I started up this company, and, you know, I could obviously grow it if I wanted to, but it's kind of boutique, and I only work with a certain number of clients, having fun helping out people and still staying connected to the industry. I got a little venture capital company. I do some investments in different types of startups and stuff like that. So that's exciting. And, you know, spend lots of time, you know, fishing, and I'm going fishing tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to it. First day on the hike in the rivers. And but you know, you've seen me out at the events. I've been doing a lot of public speaking. Last year, I think I did like 10 different shows, and it's been fun.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate you sharing the gospel, getting up on stage. I've seen you speak a couple times now, and I always look forward to it, because it's not going to be a classic PowerPoint walking through a deck. Like, I don't know what's coming out on stage, but I know it's going to be entertaining.
No decks.
Oh, man. All right. Well, let's start to wrap this thing up and land the plane. Steve, you've shared so much, but I always ask at the end of every podcast episode for a trade secret, something you've learned from, bruises and scars over the years. What's the one piece of advice you want to leave our listeners with?
One piece of advice. I think it's funny, because at this recent Leanscapers thing in Chicago, and Jennifer talked about vivid vision and stuff like that. I was never a real big, really write it down to the details. But I think that when you get up in the morning, what happens is people forget about that stuff. So they'll do a vision plan, or they'll have goals or strategies, and then they get put on a computer nowadays, and they're stored. You never look at it. And I always think that, and it worked for me, and I think people should try it, is just to come up with kind of a real quick mantra or a quick sentence or a few words that sum up what you're trying to do that year, or a challenge that you want to overcome. And you need to put it somewhere, like you see it all the time, whether you write it on your, mirror with your wife's lipstick, or you have it at the, it becomes just part of you, right? So, 1 year mine was 50M thinking, and I just kept thinking about that in my head, and 50M thinking. Everybody in my company, I had hats and shirts, and it got ridiculous. After about 4 weeks into this, they always like, Steve, what's this 50M thinking? I go, $50 million thinking. That's all I'm thinking about is we're going to be $50 million, and don't come to me with any ideas or anything if they aren't a $50 million company idea. And it was funny because the first week a guy came to me and said, well, we should do stuff like this. I go, get out of my office. I made a big scene. Everybody laughed. So that's not 50M thinking. And then what happened is it was so simple, and everybody started to talk about it. Like, yeah, I got a 50M idea and I got a 50M thought. And we started. So now it just became, that's it, like 50M, right? And it just stuck. And that's what I think people have trouble with, is getting traction on things. They make it so hard to remember. They make things so, like, there's so many things going on. And I think if you can come up with one sentence or a couple words that really grasp what you want to get done for the year, and just keep pounding on that nail till it's so far into the wood that you'll never come out, I think you're going to find that you get traction. And then next year you pick a new one. And it just grounds you. It's just so grounded because you just stay focused, right? So
yeah. It's great advice. I love that. It's ours is at least it's 26 and 26 million in 2026.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And it's just, it's simple. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be right. It's just what we're talking about.
Yeah. And have fun with it. Put on a baseball hat, put it on the front of your license plates on your truck, whatever it takes to stick, because one of the main jobs of a CEO is to have clarity. And it's pretty hard if it takes you half an hour every time you got to explain it. I'll guarantee you nobody's listening to you. Nobody.
Yeah. Well, that was a fun conversation, man. Thanks for coming on Trades Talk.
Thanks for tuning in to Trades Talk, where the next generation of disruptors comes to raise the bar. If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in the trades who's ready to level up. For more tools, insights, and community, follow host Justin White and join the movement at jwhitegroup.com.